Good evening, everyone. This is Coach Jishi, and I just wanted to welcome everyone to the swim video analysis webinar, and it will be presented by Coach Vinny Johnson. So I just want to give you a quick background on Coach Vinny, and then I will let him take things over. And I think you probably heard that the webinar is being recorded, so it will be available to you at a later point. It'll be posted on the websites. And for today, if you have any questions, you can either type them into the chat box and then I'll go ahead and read them to Vinny towards the end of the webinar, or if you want, you can just go ahead and ask. I think right now everyone is automatically put on mute with your cameras off. You can change those and come up if you do have a question. So about Vinny, I'm just going to let people into the waiting room as they come in. So Coach Vinny Johnson is a QT2 level 3 coach, and his background and expertise is in swimming. He was a collegiate swimmer and then shifted over to triathlon racing. He raced triathlon for 21 years, his last 2 years as a pro, and he's coached with QT2 systems for 9 years now. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Vinny. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Let me just get things up. Just a little more background. I grew up swimming kind of in the inner city, so we had to kind of compete against other schools that had very, very elaborate programs, and kids had tons of background in terms of their athletic ability in swimming. A lot of us just entered swimming in high school, and we had to very quickly kind of catch up. And what ended up happening was our coach really focused on the little things and not necessarily the big things, because things like training were not there in terms of athletic history. So it's all these little things that we had to pay attention to, and it made kind of a huge difference in terms of our competitive ability. And so kind of the point of this program is just to kind of get rid of some of that, that stuff in terms of a lot of our insecurities, especially around swimming, is most of us don't come from a swimming background, yet we have to swim in a triathlon. So we have to really pay attention to the little things that we can control. And one of the biggest things that I see with triathletes is the fact that their bodies are not designed to swim. And a lot of that is just due to tightness in the shoulder blades. Yet a lot of the literature we read and a lot of the things that coaches might talk about is a catch. And in order to catch water, and some of us have heard of this early vertical forearm, we need super, super flexible shoulder blades, which triathletes just don't have. And so a lot of times we spend a lot of energy on doing things that we really probably will never be able to do, as opposed to, why don't we just concentrate on things that we can do and try to make up for lost time that way. And so that's kind of the point of this program, is just to kind of show you some of the basics that we can work on and get better at, and at the end kind of not expend a lot of energy on possible things that are a waste of time. Swimming, luckily for triathletes, a very small amount of race day, but there is a lot of stress and anxiety that kind of goes into swimming, and so some of these points will help you in terms of making sure that when the swim is over, hasn't negatively impacted your day, and you still kind of have the rest of your race, and you can really kind of step it up when it really counts, which is the last half of the run. So I'll kind of get going. I'm going to go through a couple slides, and then I'm going to show you just a quintessential video that I usually get from an athlete, and kind of just show how important it is to get quick videos. So how to do it, and then what, from my point of view, what it looks like when I see a video, the things that kind of jump out. And so the video represents pretty much the most common flaws that I see in just kind of entry-level swimming, triathletes in general. Just a couple slides, I'll kind of go over some concepts, and then I'll show you the swimming video, and then I'll transition into just some basic drills that are really kind of great to do. So let me just get my... Reem, I don't know if I can share if I'm not the owner.
You should be able to.
Share my screen.
Hold on. Let me just see. It's not letting you do it. Oh, hold on a second. Who can share? Is that working for you now? Try that. Because I'm not sharing. If you go on to share screen at the bottom, what does that do?
All security. What is going on?
Because it says, I have it set that all participants can share. So you should be able to.
All right, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna try something different.
You want to send it over to me?
I might be able to join with a different computer. I'm sorry. I wonder if this computer just doesn't. For some reason, I have some security things. Let me try it one more time. All right. We're good now, right?
Yep, we're good.
All right. So I'm sorry, it must have been the settings on my different computer. So okay, so we can see my screen.
Yep, we can see your screen.
Ready to go?
Yeah, all set.
Okay. Sorry about that. So this is just basically trying to kind of focus in on, not thinking about your arms and thinking about other things that are directly kind of under your control, which is ultimately your body. Just to kind of talk about just a little bit, the problem with swimming is that it's a very, very hard concept to wrap your brain around because water is a liquid substance. And yet we are asked to grab it with just our hand and kind of the inside of our forearm. And yet we have to grab onto something that's a liquid and then propel our bodies forward. most of us are used to obviously just interacting with the ground. So when we're running or cycling, we're putting force on something that's relatively solid, and it's easy to propel our bodies forward. So when you run, there's 2 points that constantly interact with the environment, which is obviously your feet. So that's really the only thing you have to really worry about. So it's easy to kind of propel yourself forward. The same point, if you want to run faster, you just move your legs faster, or you put more force on those 2 points and you propel yourself forward quicker. With cycling, there's 5 points: your hands, your butt, and then your 2 feet. So those 5 things interact with the bike that's relatively rigid. You put force on that frame, which is going to exert or transfer the energy to the wheels, and the wheels grab the road and you propel yourself forward. You want to cycle faster, turn the pedals over quicker, put more force on the pedals, and you propel yourself through the environment quicker. When we're swimming, we're just surrounded by points of the environment. And again, it's a liquid substance, it's not a solid. And yet we're asked to just grab it with the inside of our hand and the inside of our forearm, and we have to propel ourselves forward. So it just becomes a technique driven sport as opposed to a fitness driven sport. And that kind of runs into a bit of a conundrum with our brains, because we're kind of, the way we grow up, it's like you work harder, you put more force into something, you're going to get more out of it. When you start to fatigue, pain, no gain, and just work harder, move your muscles faster, harder, stronger, whatever, and you're going to get your outcome. With swimming, because it's such a technique driven sport, when you fatigue or you want to go faster, you just have to be smarter, not necessarily work harder. Because sometimes the harder we work in the swimming aspect of it, it doesn't always transfer into actual gains in terms of time or pace. We grow up as bipedal organisms, so all we do is basically walk through the environment on our 2 legs. And a lot of times the way we interact with things daily is not a swim-like motion. We grab a drawer and we pull it forward. We tend to do a lot of things where we're pulling towards us with our arms, like in this direction, as opposed to in swimming, we're constantly pulling in this direction. And again, it gets back to that scapular flexibility. Swimmers are very, very flexible, and sometimes they're bit of a kind of mutant type of human form, where they're extremely flexible throughout the back, really, really big hands, big feet. Sometimes pure swimmers are just the worst runners that you can ever see, just because of the fact they're almost like not built for land. They're built for more of an aquatic type of environment. Really short legs, long like Michael Phelps, short legs, long torso, and it doesn't necessarily always lend well to that run and bike. And so kind of the way we're built isn't obviously for the water. I think a lot of the things I run into is really just, what is the goal of swimming when you are tri training? And the ultimate goal is for you to not have the swim negatively impact your day. And sometimes that's more due to our stress level, because it's the start of the race. It's not really much of kind of a warm up. It's cold. The water can be cold. The water is dark. And so a lot of the times that we go into tri training, it's super important just to have it almost be over with and not necessarily be a big impedance to the rest of your day. And then also we need to kind of think about too, the gains that we can get in time. I don't see huge jumps or gains in time in terms of tri training for swimming. And I used to do 10,000 yards twice a day. So 20,000 yards a day, 6 days a week. So well over 100, 120,000 yards in a week. And week in and month out, and year after year, that's kind of what I did. And that's real kind of swim training, 8 to 10,000 yards for a session. We are never going to get to that in triathlon training. If we get to 10,000, 15,000, maybe the pros are doing close to 20 to 30,000 a week. That's great. And that's such a small percentage of what real swimmers do. when we run, we pretty much sometimes get to really competitive types of running mileage. And the same thing with cycling. We can get really close to those, higher end miles that we accumulate over a week. But swimming just has a lot of logistical constraints to it. You have to drive somewhere. You have to have a schedule, most likely at a pool, that you have to fit it in. And usually pool times are really short, especially now. And it's really hard to really train for it. So instead, what we have to do again is to really focus on things that we can control. I know I don't really have a slide devoted to this, but just some things to really think about is when we are at a start, it's a very stressful time. And for some reason, everybody feels like they need to go as fast as they possibly can when the gun goes off, even for an Ironman where it's 140 miles, but everyone starts sprinting for the first minute, and it's pretty intense. And we're not ready for that because we're ready for a very long day. And what ends up happening is we tend to really concentrate on breathing in a lot, and because we're going so fast, when you breathe in a lot, you don't get to breathe out a lot. And as a result, you really start to accumulate CO2 because you're not getting rid of it. So one of the more basic things I really try to get people to really focus in on is when they start a race is to really, really focus on breathing out. And sometimes we think of a breath as just kind of in our throat or upper chest, when a real proper breath starts way down at your belly button. And so it's also important to really think about when you need to breathe out, you're really forcing air out way down at kind of your belly button, lower stomach. That's where a breath starts. There's actually three parts to a breath. Your lower kind of lung, which is controlled by the navel, belly button area, stomach area. So you try to drive your belly button to your backbone. And then you have the second part of the breath, which is the upper chest. And then the third part of the breath, which is up kind of in your trachea and your throat and your sinuses in your mouth. So really kind of thinking about that. If you ever have done yoga, that's what yoga is all about, is really a proper breath. So that's really important. The other thing is when we swim, when we start, obviously the water is usually super dark, and that's stressful. We're getting tons of CO2 building up inside of us, and we're looking at something that's super dark and probably cold. In terms of like a flight or fight response, that is pretty stressful. And so one thing that I tell people to do is when they start to feel that stress kind of build at the start is to just over exaggerate your breathe in. So I don't like to see this all the time, but when we start to get stressed out, try to get as much sunlight in your eyes as possible. And that is done just by kind of, turning your head and trying to basically get your eyes to the sky. It's not a great technique, but in terms of the technique of swimming, but it really helps you to calm down. So that's one thing to kind of think about. And then sometimes when we start to kind of at the start of a swim, we will spin our wheels. So we really focus in on just catching water out in front of us, as opposed to really finishing a stroke way back down in our bodies. So those are three important things just to kind of think about when you start. Focus on breathing out, try to get your face exposed to some light, and really focus in on driving your hand down your body. And that will just hopefully calm you down a lot. And again, it is tough. You have this really tight wetsuit on. Everyone goes really fast right off the gun. And those are just some little things to kind of help you calm down. And sometimes just stop, get out of the way, catch your breath, and continue going. It's probably 20 to 40 seconds that, you just tie your shoe quicker and you make up that time. So what I want to just focus in on is just the difference between kind of focusing on the arms. So early vertical forearm is kind of the catchphrase, and that just means that you get your forearm vertical as early as possible, which most of us can't do. So instead, let's just really think about some body vessel basics. Some things that you can focus in on for your arm, even though you might not have the flexibility, is just some concepts. So one thing is that when you swim, when your arm enters the water, you move past your arm doesn't move past you. And think of cross-country skiing, where you put your pole into the snow and then your body moves past that pole. It's the same concept with swimming. The arm goes in, it stays there. Now you have to think about, what are you doing with your body to try to get your body past your arm. Always try to keep your forearm below your elbow, your wrist below your forearm, and your hand below your wrist. Okay, it's super, super important just to always make sure that you kind of have this general concept where your hand is, again, below your wrist is below your elbow. And that is just super important. Sometimes I'll talk about this in a second. And that's just all about having a very high elbow. So sometimes we hear that high elbow recovery. So as you bring your arm over, your elbows are kind of trying to get to the ceiling. Some basic things is just make sure your elbow is always facing the side wall when it's underwater. Never lock your elbow when you fully extend. Okay, so when you are swimming and you extend your arm, you don't want to see the inside of your elbow. You always want to make sure that the inside of your elbow you can't see, because that means that the outside of your elbow is facing the side wall. Something that we do and we don't even realize it is when we get out of the water, we conduct a perfect swim stroke. So if you're in a pool and you're done and you're going to get out of the water, you put your hands on the deck and you push your body up out of the water. You have just conducted a perfect swim stroke. You've taken your hands, you have placed them in front of your shoulder. And what do? You put your elbow above your forearm is above your wrist is above your hand, and you exert force on the deck and you push straight down towards your hips. So if you ever really want to kind of just feel what it should look like and what it ultimately should feel like, is just constantly kind of just push yourself up out of the water from the deck. And that really drives home what everything should feel like and where everything should be when you do actually swim. Because a lot of us put our hands in front of our head. We have a crossover. So again, try to push yourself out of the pool and you put your hands kind of in front of your head and try to push yourself out. It's really hard to do. Or we have too wide of a stroke and we put our hands way out when we enter the water. Try to push yourself out of the water. When you do that, you can't do it. So when we push ourselves up from a desk, push ourselves out of the water at a pool, we always are putting our hands in front of our shoulders and pushing straight down. And that's just something to kind of think about when you do it. And if you had your elbows locked and you tried to do that, even right now, you're sitting on a desk at a computer, lock your elbows and try to push yourself up. It's harder to do. Instead, what you have to do is you have to unlock your elbow so your elbow gets above your arms. Something that when I give lessons, when somebody swims away from me, I always kind of tell them I should be able to see the inside of your palm at all times. So if I'm standing on the deck and a person's swimming away from me, the hand should always be facing me because they're swimming away from me. And that ensures that you're always putting leverage on water in the right spot. I call it, or a smiley face, on the inside of the hand. Middle finger always goes in front of the shoulder. So again, something to kind of think about. If you ever have any kind of shoulder irritation, it's usually due to the fact that your index finger is entering the water first. So some of us will try to be a little more streamlined and enter with our index finger, and that just kind of torques the head of the humerus ever so slightly. And then when you catch water, it just puts more strain on the actual arm, and that causes some problems. Some things that you can kind of think about. We, as in QT2, we tend to do some different types of testing, and you might see this in some of your workouts, where we will have you do 100 TT no kick and a 50 TT kick. The 100 TT no kick is a swim without kicking, and then the straight up 50 TT kick is basically kicking with the kickboard. And what we do is we take that number and we do some math and we basically get a number. And that number tells us if you have a weak kick or a weak pull. And that's just something that you can do every now and then just to see how your propulsion is possibly improving. Something that's very, well, on Garmin, when you swim with a Garmin watch, I think it's called I think they call it Swift they have an S there. I think it's S golf or S without or just SOLF. Basically, it's the number of strokes that you're taking. And we do golf, which is basically you count the number of strokes you take in a 50, and then you add that to the time it took you to swim that 50, and you get a score. Around 70, if you think about playing golf, around 70 is par. And then we have numbers that go up into the 80s and 90s and sometimes the 100s. The farther that number gets away from par, the worse your body position is. So again, this is a great way to every once in a while just check your body vessel. How well are you planing through the water? The lower the score is, the better your body position is. So I usually see like 90s for people that are kind of in that 2-minute 150 range in terms of pace per 100. 80s, you start to kind of get into kind of the 140s and upper 130s, and then 70s around pars. That's when you hit that 130 or less pace per 100. So that's just something to kind of monitor every once in a while and really kind of mess around with. You can kind of do it a couple times and make some adjustments to your body and see what it actually does to your strokes. In terms of your head position, the water should always hit the crown of your head. When you basically take a breath, you need to ensure that you have a bow wave. So if you ever watch a boat cuts through the water and it has a bow wave. So the front of the boat cuts through the water, and then the water will kind of dip down and then follow the line of the boat. Your crown of your head is what is going to pierce the water. So that position is super, super important. Arm position, I always kind of already talked about. And then the head position and the breath. One thing to always think about is, and this is the most common issue that I see with swim strokes, is people will breathe with two eyes out of the water. And that has basically just ruined everything. And we could stop the presentation right now and just start swimming with one eye in the water, one eye out of the water, and your swimming will vastly improve. And the reason being is because in swimming, when you have something go in one direction, something's going to go in another direction, and usually the opposite of what you want it to do. So when we have water is relatively flat, and we're trying to pierce through the water. If your head goes up, if you take both of your eyes out of the water, now all of a sudden your upper body has almost come out of the water. So something's going to go down in the water. And that means your legs are going to drop. If your legs are dropping, now all of a sudden you're hydrodynamically inefficient and you're kind of going through the water like that. When you take a breath, it's also very scary, especially if you're not comfortable in the water. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to clear your mouth of the water. So when you do take a breath, you're not getting water in your mouth. So it's a reaction of kind of trying to be safe and not be in the stressful state of possibly swallowing water. But if you were to actually do it right, it would be more safe than if you took two eyes out of the water. If you take two eyes out of the water, you basically have a straight line of water going across your mouth. So what ends up happening is you move even farther away from the water. If you pierce the water with the crown of your head and you have one eye in the water, what ends up happening is the wave actually dips under your mouth. You actually have more room to breathe if you have one eye in the water. You take both out, the water just cuts right across your mouth. So you move even farther away to clear it out. Also, when you take a breath, you want to kind of breathe to the side. You don't want to breathe like a ghost. Okay, so a perfect kind of oval. You kind of want to breathe like Popeye, because you will have a bow wave and you can kind of move your mouth ever so slightly to the side in order to get more clearance. So instead of moving your head out of the water to clear your mouth, just move your mouth to clear itself from the water. Again, easier said than done. It's very stressful, but it actually makes things so much easier if you just use your head, pun intended, and really kind of make sure that one eye is constantly underwater, the other one out, breathe like Popeye, and all of a sudden you are planing through the water as opposed to kind of pushing through the water. The tension of swimming in terms of keeping your body vessel relatively rigid is in what's called a T. And a T is an imaginary line from shoulder to shoulder and then straight down your sternum to your belly button, all the way down to your groin. If you can tighten the T up when you swim, and specifically when you breathe, your body line will be more rigid and you will pierce through the water, kind of like a sea kayak, as opposed to if you don't tighten that up, you tend to be more kind of like just an inflatable raft. Your body kind of moves in many different directions. The reason why we need tension in our body when we swim is because we tend to lose balance. And when we are swimming and we go to take a breath, we have lost balance. If you never take a breath, your body is square to the water constantly. Okay, so you're just going forward, your shoulders are square, and most of your surface area of your body is facing the floor. As a result, you're perfectly balanced. But when you go take a breath, now all of a sudden the surface area that's exposed to the floor has decreased because now you're on your side and you drop like a ton of bricks. And we make a quick reaction, unconscious reaction, to catch ourselves, catch our balance. Just like if we were to kind of lose our balance on land, what do? We tend to push out with either our arm or our leg. So we push and try to grab the environment. And we do the same thing when we swim. When we turn to the side, we tend to push down on the water and then we open up our legs. We scissor kick, and that increases our surface area because we have just lost our surface area on our torso. So instead of using your arms and your legs to catch your balance, you need to tighten up your T. So when you go to take a breath, think about putting pressure, kind of when you move your head, kind of put pressure on your chest and kind of think about tightening up shoulder to shoulder and specifically down your abdomen to your groin. So you want to tighten your abs. You almost want to have that sensation like you have to go to the bathroom and you have to hold it. Hold on to that in your groin. So tighten it up. Tighten up your abs, tighten up your chest, and you've caught your balance. Now your arm can do what it needs to do, which is swim. Again, easier said than done, but just something to always think about when you drill is to keep that body line tight. That's where you find your balance. So these are just some videos just to kind of show you some basic drills that we can kind of think about. And this is probably the best drill out there in terms of just really slowing things down and thinking about what I just kind of went over, which is your head position and thinking about your T without worrying about swimming. Drills are really good to do with fins because most of us struggle with propulsion, and fins give us the ability to propel through the environment without having to worry about other things. So all your toys that you have in swimming are really about getting rid of something that you have to worry about so that you can actually focus on something that you need to work on. And fins are great for that because, again, we don't have to worry about getting ourselves moving through the environment as opposed to just really focus on what you need to do. So fins are great. I always like to have people think about military posture before they push off the wall. For most of us, we sit at a desk, we sit at a computer, we're kind of hunched over, crouched over. Our posture is usually horrible because we're looking at phones and things like that. And then we're asked to swim, and sometimes I actually can really tell if somebody works at a desk a lot just when they swim because they're hunched back, bent over, posture is horrible through the water. They're kind of going through the water, bent and not piercing through the water. So just right before you push off, just think about standing at attention, military posture, pin the shoulder blades back, tighten up the back, get your neck in line with your spinal column, and now push off. Something that we'll look at in this drill is just the arm angle always when you're doing this. Again, it's around 22 degrees, and I'll show you what that looks like. This drill is great to just focus in on your forearm, where it's located, where your fingertips are. You always want to make sure when you do this drill, your hand's not out like a stop sign, and that's why fingertips down like that allows you to pierce through the water, because sometimes we enter and then we push our hands up like that. That's called stop signal. And then always kind of check the breath in terms of where the location is. So we'll kind of look at that right now. Again, they're kicking on their side, going in a straight line, and really just concentrating on head position when a breath is taken. I'll stop this for a second just because most of us, well, not right now, I don't know what your pools are like, but a lot of times when we're swimming, we're circle swimming, and we're circle swimming with strangers. And this drill is intimidating because you might not go in a straight line. So make sure you do try this alone, first off, when you first try to master it, because a lot of times people just bounce between the lane lines, and that is a great indication that their body line is off. You should be going straight. If your T is tight and you have military posture and your arm is in a perfect position, you are going in a straight line. And if you're bouncing back and forth between the lane lines, then that means that your posture is poor and your T isn't tight, your vessel is weak and soft. And so you just need to really concentrate on tightening the body more and more and more, and you'll go in a straight line. That's just a switch to kind of get to the other side. So it's just taking a stroke just to kind of work on both sides. It is important to breathe on both sides, and only because we don't control. Well, I'll talk about this. Let me just show you this first. This is the fingertips down. So this is the position you want. Right in front of the shoulder. If your arm is out here, you're going to go on the other side of the lane. If it's on the inside, you'll go to the other side, and that's how you bounce back and forth. Usually it's just the location of the arm. Okay, but again, you can look when your face goes down, you can kind of check the inside of your elbow or not. You shouldn't be able to see it. Great drill just to practice breathing. And again, breathing on both sides is important because we can't control the conditions on race day. You might have a wind, you might have waves, you might have competition on one side of you. So every time you do go take a breath, the sun might be rising, the sun could be in your eyes, and you just can't breathe on the side that you normally breathe on. So you should have the ability to breathe on both sides. Do you have to all the time? No. Whatever works, whatever is faster, do it. But just make sure you do have it in your bag of tricks, because sometimes you just can't control the side you breathe on due to the course and the conditions. Okay, so that is kick on the side. The next one is just now adding a stroke to kick on the side. So this is the progression. Once you've mastered kick on the side, now just add a stroke. So 616 means that you kick 6 times, take a stroke, and then you kick 6 times, take a stroke, and just repeat that process. So again, always use fins. You're going to kick and then take a stroke. Breathe after every stroke. This helps to practice that. Check arm position, the degree of your arm angle, forearms, the fingertips are down, no stop signals, tight T. And then again, make sure that you're straight and you're not snaking in the water. So 616. So it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, stroke. Take a breath, practice that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, take a stroke. So again, this just helps you to practice breathing and tightening the T upon the stroke. And I kind of mentioned that when you're square to the water, you're balanced, but you're also at your slowest position. Your fastest position is on your side. So you want to get from one side of your body to the other side of the body as quickly as possible. And that's why we take our strokes. But at the same point, on your side is the least amount of balance. So this is that 22-degree arm angle. So it's very, very slightly angled underneath the surface. It's just not straight out like we normally tend to have a capacity to do. It's just angled downwards, and that's 22 degrees, 45 degrees would be straight down. Then you can just progress. You can increase those numbers. So now you can do 6, 3, 6. So you're going to kick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Take 3 strokes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you take 3 strokes. The next level up from that is to get even quicker, which is instead of doing 6 kicks, you do 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, take a stroke. 1, 2, 3, 4, take a stroke. 4, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, take 3 strokes. So you can kind of enhance this to more swimming by just increasing the numbers and the ratios there. But again, just notice on the breath, again, that one eye is always kind of underneath the water. The head is piercing through the water. Okay, never really comes out of the water. And again, the arm angle, fingertips are down, elbow is above the hands. So it's just all about kind of catching that water properly. Broken arrow is a great drill to kind of take a crutch away. I usually like to do this in terms of when I do a lesson, is to take something away from the swim stroke to really cause your body to react. And usually the body reacts in order to kind of save itself, usually from going under the water. So a broken arrow is a great way to kind of take something away from the stroke and see how your body reacts, because then the body will learn to react quicker. And also this one's great just for tightening up the actual vessel, because you actually have to do it in order for you to kind of keep on moving forward. So again, use fins, and what you're going to do is you're going to stop your arm halfway through the recovery. The pause is going to cause you to sink ever so slightly, or at least get that sensation. So what you have to do is you have to overcompensate for that sensation of sinking in the water. And you do so by kicking a little more, engaging your thighs more, your glutes more, and really tightening up your body line so you hold position as opposed to sink in the water. There's the pause, and then the broken arrow piece is you bend the arm. It's kind of broken arrow. Sometimes we see this referred to as sailboat or shark fin, because you actually kind of make this triangular shape with your arm when you have the recovery. It looks so easy. This person's doing it, but I'm telling you, when you stop that arm, you have that sensation of sinking really, really, really quickly. So your body has to react in order to kind of overcompensate for that. This really helps to loosen up the scapula in the back, just because of the fact that you are really focusing in on bending that elbow, which we tend to not do all the time. Doggy paddle is great. This is basically swimming without a recovery. Okay, so the whole swim stroke is underwater. So this is awesome for body rotation and just really getting a feel for the water underneath. And it really gets you to reach properly, and you can pay attention to what you're doing. You always want to reach out in front of your shoulder. A lot of us, our basic technique flaw is to cross over. So our hands will go kind of in front of our head as opposed to in front of our shoulder. And this allows you to really just be your own coach and look at what's happening in what you should be doing. So just doggy paddle. You can do this with a pull buoy or fins, doesn't matter. But usually you're really focusing on rotation. So a pull buoy is a little better for doggy paddle than fins. Okay, but a great way just to kind of swim without having to think about kicking or your recovery or even really breathing for that matter, because you're kind of facing forward. You can really just focus in on where you're catching water, which is out, should be out in front of your shoulder. And then last one is kind of the king of drills. And this, again, you kind of need to probably make sure there's not too many people in the lane because it gets a little messy. It's called unco because you're going to get very, very uncoordinated. And by getting uncoordinated in the water, your body has to overcompensate for that by doing the right thing. So this really forces your body to do what it should be doing by taking away certain aspects of the stroke. Always use fins with this because it's super difficult, and you're going to start off basically, I call it Unco 100, which is a 25 of corpse swimming, which is you're swimming with no arms. So it's kind of like that dodgeball movie where, you know, if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge anything. If you can swim without your arms, you're fine. So it really forces you to use your body and your legs and the rotation of your body to swim. And then we add one arm. So then you start swimming with just your left arm. And then you're going to swim with just your right arm. And then you're going to swim normally. And you always want to breathe on the non-stroking side of an unco. And a lot of the problems that I see when people do, and I'll stop it there, this arm is not swimming, but look at where the shoulder is pointing, straight up. A lot of times people will one arm swim and they won't raise that shoulder of the arm they're not swimming with. They'll just hold it on their side and swim square to the water, as opposed to, no, rotate the arm like you normally would. So try to rock that shoulder with the arm that's to your side, try to rock it all the way out of the water. So that's one thing I always see people one arm swimming, they just plow through the water, as opposed to no, continue to rotate through the water and use that shoulder as you would if the arm was working. And that just helps to kind of keep the whole swim stroke moving right. So 25, no arms. And again, when you do that, make sure you are rotating like you would if you had arms working. And then you swim a 25 with just the left, swim a 25 with just the right, then tie it all together with a normal swim. And that's super important to do whenever you drill, is drill, but then tie a swim right to it in terms of just a normal stroke, because it will help to ingrain some of the sensations that you got from the drill. And then these are just some ways to incorporate drilling into pretty much some of the QT2 style swim workouts. A lot of times we just have these long swims, 800 warm up, 100, at TT Z1 or TT pace plus 10 seconds, that kind of thing. Never stop yourself from working in a drill. Sometimes when we swim too much, especially when we kind of hit the middle of the season, when we do a lot of cycling and a lot of running, our body gets shot. Our sensation for the water, our ability for our hips to move and our legs to function properly pretty much disconnects from our upper body because our lower body is so fatigued. So it actually is super important to drill a little bit more, especially on those Mondays when you come off a really long weekend. If it has 1,000 straight swim, don't feel like you have to do it that way. There's ways to incorporate some drilling where you can kind of still cover distance and get it done, but you kind of break it up. Just thinking about 100s in terms of 25s and 75s. So having just 75 swim, 25 kick. We'll incorporate a kick every once in a while. And a kick is great for rotation. And again, triathletes, you're not going to have a kick for propulsion. We work on kick and we have kick in our workout because it's all about rotating the body. And the rotation always starts with the kick. It's not necessarily a propulsion piece to kind of triathlon training, especially because we're in a wetsuit. It basically raises our legs anyways, and you kind of get the benefit of being a pretty good kicker by just throwing a wetsuit on. 75 drills, and then always just incorporate a swim right after a drill. Usually within 100, just because it does ingrain some of that into your body. Think about always kind of descending some swims. So sometimes we might feel very flat in the water. And if you feel like you don't have a feel for the water, you just don't feel like you have any gears, just swim fast for very short periods of time. And 25s are perfect. 825s, descend 1 through 4, and then 5 through 8. So just get faster and faster and faster. It's a great way just to kind of open up the throttle sometimes. And, showing up Monday morning after a long weekend and having to swim 1,000 straight, sometimes it just makes you feel really flat in the water and you don't really have any gears. So again, just stop and do 825s, open it up, and you'll feel so much better afterwards. Paddles, I love, especially as our legs kind of get shot. It's a really good way for us to enhance the strength of our stroke by increasing the surface area of our hands. So paddles and pulling are always important, especially when we have a small amount of time. Again, I don't know what your pools are like, but I have 45 minutes. And I can't get a lot done in 45 minutes. So instead, what I do is I put paddles on, I put a pool buoy on, and I do something called a fartlek, which is a great way to break up long distances. Fartlek is just Swedish for speed play. And so if you swim 1 lap easy, 1 lap hard, 2 laps easy, 2 laps hard, 3 laps easy, 3 laps hard, 4 laps easy, 4 laps hard, that's a 500. And it's a great way not to have to worry about counting laps or hundreds and what your distance is. If you just fartlek up to 4, you cover a 500. And then if you just go back down from that, you cover 1,000. So it's a nice way to turn the brain off and you're just counting little laps here and there, increasing and decreasing pace. Kind of go up all the way, 4 easy, 4 hard, 4 easy, 4 hard, 3 easy, 3 hard, 2 easy, 2 hard, 1 easy, 1 hard, boom. Go up and down, you got 1,000 in the bank. If you have poles and paddle or a pull buoy and a paddle on, you really blasted up your scaps and your lats and your arms, and you had a good workout, especially right now where pool time is relatively low. I also like to fartlek open water. And so you can set your Garmin to go off at a certain time frequency. So usually what I'll do is I'll have it go off every 3 minutes, and I'll go 3 minutes easy, 3 minutes kind of race pace, 3 minutes easy, 3 minutes race pace. You can do it by a minute, you can do it by 2 minutes, you can do it by 5 minutes. But that's a great way too, because open water swimming, sometimes we just kind of go at a relatively steady pace for a long distance, which isn't horrible. But if you need to kind of get in some quality work, just set the Garmin to beep at a certain distance frequency or a certain time frequency, and that will just help you to kind of turn it on and off, on and off. Main sets, anytime you have a big main set, we tend to be type A triathletes that don't like to stand around too much. So just always feel free to do some active rest. And again, doing a quick broken arrow 25 or a quick doggy paddle 25, 25 broken air, 25 doggy paddle for your rest. And then do kind of, especially like PPTs where you're doing like a 50 all out and then you kind of rest for 90 seconds. Some of us just can't do it. And we end up talking to our neighbors and wasting time and just not getting anything out of it because we mentally can't sit still. So again, just drill. Okay, drill 25 and then do another 50 for your PPT or drill 50, whatever. But just incorporating a drill and active rest sometimes helps to ease the mind, but at the same point, make you a faster swimmer. And always try to end a session relatively fast. So doing 25s all out real quick, just a couple of them, or just a half a length, so 12.5 yards. All out is a pretty violent way just to open up the engine and then kind of break it down. So just some simple ways to kind of tweak the quintessential kind of QT2 sometimes stuff that's written and incorporate things on the fly. It's hard to swim solo because you don't get feedback from somebody watching you. So sometimes you just have to feel like this doesn't feel right. So what can I do differently? Do drills, go super fast for short distances, or just put po buoy and paddles and fartlek. And usually it kind of wakes everything up. All right. So I'll kind of open up the chat to any questions. And then I have a question in the chat. But again, feel free to kind of just, ask some questions. So in the chat, it's basically just a challenge that somebody has to basically bringing their swimming skills in the pool to open water. And the question is really just about having some inability because of the wetsuit to utilize the lower body. Triathlon wetsuits are really bizarre in terms of their design because they are really, really tight in the lower body. And that's only because the increase in the amount of neoprene in the wetsuit down in the lower body to make it very buoyant. And what I would kind of tend to do in open water when that happens and our legs feel like they're flat and we're not getting rotation from that, is try to concentrate on kicking up instead of kicking down. Okay, so a lot of times what we try to do is we try to drive our feet down, our legs down to kick. Instead, why don't you focus on the opposite end of a kick, which is try to get the heels up out of the water, or at least kind of feel a breeze on your heels. And that will kind of raise your body line. But also if you're running into problems where the lower part of your wetsuit is tight and your rotation is lacking and you're trying to kick more, it means you're kicking down more. So as a result, your body line tends to be relatively flat. So instead, just try to raise everything, which is your heels. The other thing too is I sometimes will tell people to try to, again, feel a breeze on your bum. So if your bum cheeks are kind of out of the water ever so slightly, you should feel a breeze on there. Obviously not with a wetsuit, but it's more of kind of a concept. And again, that will just help to kind of raise that lower body. So then you can rotate more.
How effective is the kicking?
For the rotation, it's extremely important. In terms of propulsion, in terms of a triathlete, it's the last thing you want to kind of think about or worry about is using up your legs to move you forward because you still need to cycle and run. So at the same point, it needs to initiate your rotation. So if we think about a punch, because ultimately what you're doing is you are throwing your arm out in front of you. And we don't want to throw it out with a jab. We want to throw it out with a roundhouse kind of swing. And if you think about, all right, if you're going to roundhouse swing, where is it starting from? Where's that coil effect anchored in order to kind of coil your body, uncoil your body out and throw your arms out. It's at the ground level, it's at your toes, it's at your feet. So the initial rotation is basically kick down, and then the opposite arm goes forward because it starts the whole rotation of the body. So a kick is important because it starts the swim stroke.
So is a 2-beat kick as important as like a 6?
It depends on when the beats are happening. You will see it all. Okay, if you even watch the Olympics, you will see a 2-beat Olympic swimmer. You will see a 6-beat, 12-beat, 16-beat. As long as the beat is in line with what it's supposed to be doing, it does its job.
Thank you.
All right.
Yep.
But yeah, and a lot of us just have this natural tendency to be one of them. And it's kind of one of these just things in terms of our timing belt. I'm a 2-beat kicker, and I can't 6-beat. Even when I'm sprinting, I can't, and it's not effective. And I'm kind of slower almost if I try to 6-beat because my timing is off, and I'm just a natural 2-beat kicker. But it works, and it does everything right, and I'm faster for it. So it's all about when the beat is happening and how effective it is.
Great. Thank you.
Vinny, can you talk a little bit about the swim analysis that you're offering?
Yep. So a lot of times, obviously, we don't have an idea of what we look like in the water. And so we are offering basically me looking at a video of you swimming. And it's super easy to do from my point of view because I know what I'm looking at. And all it really takes is a kind of iPhone video of you swimming. And there's usually a lifeguard on deck, and they're sometimes just easily ask them to just take a quick snapshot of you swimming from the side. And then if you swim towards the phone, those are the two kind of most important kind of video pieces that I can utilize. Some of us have the capacity to get underwater footage with our phones, and that's great too. But for our purposes and basic stuff, just to kind of concentrate on, just a quick snapshot video going from one side or going from one length or covering the length and then swimming towards the phone is just right information that I need. And what it does is it helps you to visualize what you look like, because we have a concept of what we look like under the water as we swim, and it's usually way off. And to have it kind of critiqued, I can measure the angles and kind of show you what your body's doing based on the angles of your head and your arm entry. It basically offsets everything. And then I basically kind of tell you what to do in terms of the adjustments, but then the drills that you need to incorporate in your workout in order to kind of fix those flaws. But what I went over today is basically what I see in pretty much all the videos. It's body line, it's head position, it is the entry kind of in front of the head as opposed to the shoulders. And a lot of us just snake through the water because of that, because of our body line. And then from the side, we tend to plane in a relatively diagonal fashion just because we're taking our heads out of the water so much. So that's usually just what I see all the time in videos.
Okay, any other questions for Vinny? All right, well, thank you very much. It was really useful. Learned some new things. And if anyone is interested in the video analysis, it's offered as a service up on the ORR and QT2 websites. So you can check that out. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks,
Hey, thank you.
Thanks, Vinny.